You're listening to the Untitled Car Show in partnership with RightFootDown.com. Visit Right Foot Down for your daily automotive fix. If you enjoyed today's program, please tell a friend. It's the best way to support this show. If you want to visit the archives, go to YouTube and search for Untitled Car Show. That'll bring you to the archived episodes. If you want to follow the show, just search for Untitled Car Show on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You can always send an email to the show at untitledcarshow@rightfootdown.com. We're so glad you decided to spend the next hour or so with us. Without further ado, let's get into today's program. Hello and welcome to the Untitled Car Show. I'm your host, Ike. I am joined by David Obuchowski. He hosts a... so you just talk real fast, and that way they can't tell if you said it wrong. He hosts a podcast powered by Jalopnik called Tempest. You can find it on iTunes. Basically, anywhere you're hearing this podcast, you can probably find that one. And you can read his wonderful articles on Jalopnik as well that go along with all these wonderful podcasts. David, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you? I'm
doing well. I'm going to goof up. Do you mind, Dave? Is it David what you prefer?
I prefer David.
All right. I will try not to mess that up. So, David, let's just kind of, before we get into kind of the who you are as a car person questions, I'm just kind of curious, if you could give us the brief primer on what Tempest is and kind of how it came to be.
Tempest is, as you indicated, it's a podcast. It is a series. First season is 7 episodes, self-contained episodes. These are car stories, but they are really human interest stories. I like to say they're about cars and their people. So some of them are more heartbreaking and tragic. Others are funny. And they're just kind of explore the human side of things. I feel like a lot of things out there that are, media about cars focuses on the, just the machines, which is cool. But this, I wanted to bring something else to it. So, and that was really my to answer the second part of your question, how this came about. That was kind of my line of thinking, which I was writing for a year for Jalopnik, writing really long essays for them, and it was the same type of thing. These kind of, these car essays, but they're really about the people behind them and their stories. And I just felt like this would make a really good thing for audio. When I listen back to the interviews and I was transcribing them, a lot of times it just felt like, wow, there's so much emotion in the voice or whatever. And also it's fun. I have a background in broadcasting, so I pitched it. I actually put together a mock episode, and not even an episode, a segment, and sent it along, and people liked it. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. It is a wonderful program, and we're definitely going to delve into it in a bit here, but I want to kind of start this off with what I call the, inside the actor studio type questions. So
excellent.
we're going to get to kind of like who you are as a car person, These are, as we sit here today, because, all these answers could change in the next moment or in the next day or week or whatever, because if car people are, if anything, a fickle group sometimes. So,
indeed.
So it's kind of the ultimate example of that, and probably the hardest question in this whole thing is, what is your favorite car?
Oh, I see. The thing is I can answer that one no problem. Although if I ever got to drive it, maybe that would change because I've never driven it. So as long as it continues to be that thing in the distance, it will always be a 1972 Plymouth Roadrunner.
That is a good option. What is your least favorite car?
My least favorite car, do you want the make and model, or can I actually name the specific, because my least favorite car in the world is the first car I ever owned, but of course that as a kind of car in general does not deserve that. I've got the answer for you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
My least favorite car in the world, understand, as you said, we're fickle.
Mm-hmm.
So understand, this is an impulsive answer here. I'm going to go with the Ford Freestyle. I despise that car. I fucking hate that car.
I can see why. That's a very good answer. I'm curious, what in particular about it do you despise the most? Or is it
naturally
just... I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh. Well, naturally, I've owned one. So this is unlike the Roadrunner, where it's I'm just kind of dreaming of this thing that that is out there in the distance. This is from personal experience. To be clear, the first car I ever owned was far worse in terms of reliability and all that. But the Freestyle has going for it the fact that when I bought the Freestyle, even when I thought I'm getting away with something really smart here, I'm being responsible. In the moment, in every moment that I owned it, my wife and I would joke with each other, this is the ugliest fucking car that has ever existed. I mean, it looks like Shamu is the best way I could put it. When you look at that thing head on from the front, I just kept looking at it going like, why does it look like a dumb whale? Like, that's what the car looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of it all, the CVT transmission in that thing, I mean, is just will make you just it's just the worst. It's huge. The only thing it was surprisingly half decent at was we took it on like kind of a really long road trip to the. We only owned it for 3 months before I sold it, but we took it on this really long road trip from Colorado to like up through Wyoming and then Montana. And it, for some reason, it handled like switchbacks pretty well on mountains. Not in the snow,
mm-hmm.
but and of course, if you need to move like a grand piano and an office building and a zoo, you could fit all those things in there because the fucking thing is so huge. So just huge, dumb, ugly car with a horrible transmission. And that personally screwed me over at the end of that road trip. So yeah.
There's a vitriol there, I can tell. Every time I see the Freestyle, I always think it's a very ugly car, and I don't know why, but it just snapped into focus. I think what happened is, if you ever have like a group project where you're working with like a few other people, and then at the end of the project, you all come together and realize you've all been doing way the opposite thing, and you just kind of have to make it into like, well, we'll just kind of like cram it together and kind of make it work. I think that's how the Freestyle design process went along. So
you're absolutely right. I mean, that had to be it, because here's the thing. You look at it from the front, right? Someone was like, let's make a car that looks like Shamu. Like, okay, someone was thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it kind of from like a 45-degree angle, that was built on a Volvo platform. So someone was like, you know what? Let's make like an American like Volvo wagon. Which that person, I like that person. And then the guy who worked, or whoever worked on the back half of the car, the rear end of the car, was like, you know what we need is a huge fucking minivan. And so when you look at the car from the rear, I have no idea how it looks like an optical. It's like one of those optical illusion things. You look at the car from the rear, it is a minivan. When you look at it from the side, it's a wagon. When you look at it from the front, it's an animal. I mean, but I just don't know. I don't know how they did that, where you look at it from the back and you literally look like you're looking at a different car. And I think it's that thing that you're talking about. Like, okay, everyone take an aspect of the car and don't communicate with each other. Just do whatever.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to a happier question then. What automotive trend, like we're talking about like modifications here, so we're talking about like Stance, Brodozer, the crazy stuff they do down in Houston. Do you find yourself, maybe not that you want to do to your own vehicle, but you find yourself attracted to, or maybe you would want to do it to your own vehicle?
I don't know. That's a good question. Wait, let me go back to the Freestyle for 1 second, because as you can tell, I have a real dog in this fight.
Yes.
I just want to congratulate you actually for even being able to conjure up in your mind, unless you were cheating and using Google image search, when when any time you say Ford Freestyle to someone, like 99% of the time, I should say, people can't picture in their mind. They have heard of it, but they cannot even picture what the car is. So if you were actually, when I said Ford Freestyle, if you pictured it in your mind, I congratulate you, sir. You are truly a car person.
It is one of those cars where, as a car person, I feel like normal people, it's like that's a bad memory and they block it out of their mind.
Yeah.
I think, it's so weird. You kind of have to know what it looks like. And I can't use Google while I do this because it'll just crash the whole effing system. Why did I censor myself? I don't need to censor myself. I'll crash the whole fucking system. I don't know. I've been up a long time. Anyway, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. No. That's it. So, to answer your other question, I don't know. That's a good question. So, what is? I think that the sort of mod that I've always been most attracted to, and this, I don't know if this falls into your category so much, is I really like when the back is kind of jacked up. It gives it that real mean kind of classic stance. Even as a kid, I can remember like getting a Matchbox car that had like a jacked up rear end with the big wheels, and I don't know. It was like a kind of, maybe it was like a funny car or something even.
Yeah.
And I just was like loved that. So that I've always been drawn to that. I don't know that, I'd have to kind of take it on a per car basis in terms of would I do that to mine. So there you go.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Like that nice rake to it. So then the inverse question, what modification trend do you like find yourself least attracted to? The one where you're like, I just don't understand why you did that to your car.
Well, I mean, when people do, I don't even know, again, I'm not sure if this counts, so maybe I'll give you two answers, but the rolling coal thing where people do that to their trucks, like, I'm not sure there's, I just think that's awful.
That's more of a personal issue people have, where I get what you're saying. Like, because that's probably like the most despised thing I have around here. Especially, I drive around a little Fiesta in backcountry Maryland. So a lot of people attempt to roll coal, not realizing I can just get around them. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, but I mean, people do mod. They do mod their systems to be able to do that. So that's why I was lumping it into there.
No, you're right. You're right. That's a qualifiable answer. I'll give you that one.
Okay, and then I do come from New Jersey, so, it's a love it or hate it thing, and I fall into the hate it thing, so I'll give you my second answer, which is good old ground effects. Can't stand them.
So, that's going to help with a later question, believe me.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. What car do you dread being stuck behind at a red light?
Damn, that's a good question. I was stuck. I was had to get to. I was doing a guest lecture down at Denver University the other day, and I was a little bit late, and I got stuck behind a truck that was hauling like gravel,
yeah.
And I was thinking, and it was like fully loaded, and I was like, oh, okay, so my windshield's gonna get chipped. And this thing is fully loaded with gravel. It weighs 1 billion tons. I don't know what kind of setup this guy had under the hood, but he did not hold me up. I was like, damn. So he defied the expectations. But yeah, that's definitely a groan-worthy thing. That's probably kind of a trite answer though for you, but that's what I got.
That's fine. Again, it's what comes to your head. That's what makes.
Okay.
That's how we figure this stuff out. What automotive sound or noise do you love?
Automotive. Okay, so great question. Love the sound of a manual transmission. You can always tell. Like
Mm-hmm.
We live in a neighborhood where I can walk but I do every single day walk my children to school and back. And as cars go by, I don't even doesn't matter what kind of car or anything, you can hear the ones where someone is rolling their own gears, and I love it. I just love it.
Yeah, it's always like it's auditory, like, oh, I know me and that guy would get along, or that gal would get along.
Yeah.
What automotive sound or noise do you hate?
Do I hate?
This one does tend to trip up people, so this could be something like brake squeal, like a thrown rod is a typical answer. The pipes that go woo-woo, open exhaust, stuff like that are some pretty typical answers.
I think, okay, you know what? My first, again, right off the cuff answer was going to be, like, the obnoxiously loud motorcycles, but whatever. I mean, I think really what it is when it's rainy out and it's the squeaky, squealy belt.
Yes.
That's like nails on a chalkboard, right? I mean, so.
Yeah. It's always bad too, because you can always tell it's never like, oh, that guy's 5 minutes outside of the service interval. You can always tell, oh, that's been going on for a long-ass time. Like, that's a 92 Corolla running on the original belt. So. Yeah, no,
absolutely. That's exactly... it's so funny you say that, because I always have that... Like, it's funny. It's almost like anytime you hear that, you can... At least for me, all of a sudden, this entire scene, as if on stage, plays in my mind of, the guy going, "Don't worry, honey, I'm going to get the belt fixed, I promise." And she's going like, "The thing is so loud, you've got to get it fixed." And this has been their, 7-year conversation.
Yes. Like, it's on the honey-do list. I'll get around to it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm going to give you 2 cars here, and they've both been modified. You have to pick which one you keep for the rest of your life. And you're not allowed to modify it, turn it back to stock. You have to live with it how I give it to you. All right?
Oh, God.
So...
Wait, I'm going to pick one of these cars.
Yes.
And the catch is, though, I can't be like, I'm going to pick that because I've just taken the ground effects off.
Correct. Yeah. You have to live with it how it is. Yes, I see you already know how this is going. The first one is a 1972 Plymouth Roadrunner, but it's been modified with a diesel engine in it, and every time you touch the accelerator, you roll coal, and it's got ground effects.
Oh, my God. What did I get myself into?
The other one is a funny car freestyle.
So funny you say that, because when I was thinking about jacking up the rear end, I was thinking the only car that would not be good on a freestyle. The rear end is already so stupid. I will take the Plymouth Roadrunner, ground effect, diesel, rolling coal and all. I will. I'll take it proudly. Give me my damn Roadrunner.
That was a quick response. You're a man who knows what he likes.
Yeah, now here's the thing, and I'm not trying to do any loopholes here. I understand. I'm not getting out of the contract, but I can still park it in my garage, and take a beer out there, and just look at the thing and go. I mean, because that's part of it, right? I mean, no one's gonna look at the Freestyle and think anything but Shamu.
Yeah.
I look at the Roadrunner doesn't need to do a damn thing, but just be right there and me look at it. So, there you go.
Mm-hmm. I'm just picturing you in the car with your wife, and you're like, no, sweetie, it's fine. It's supposed to do that. The next 2 questions, these weren't the prepared questions, and I hope you thought long and hard about them, because I do think these are the 2 most important questions that anyone really can be asked at any time, anywhere. It's probably the most important questions ever asked in mankind history. So the first one of these is, what's the hardest food to eat while driving?
Okay, I did think long and hard about this. I feel like I don't know my saints, but would you be St. Peter at the gates, or is it St. Matthew? I'm not sure who, but I feel like I'm at the, I'm at the gates, and I have to answer these questions. So, okay, but I did think long and hard about this. I am stuck between 2 types of food. Now, your average guest is going to tell you cereal, and I accept why. Now, I'm going to go a little further. And here's what I'm torn between. Unequivocally, trying to eat ramen noodle soup.
Mm-hmm.
Ramen noodle, which is long, long noodles and very hot broth, would be very, very hard to do in a car for obvious reasons. But there's a less obvious answer, and I can't decide which is harder. And that would be a rotisserie chicken. Because, first of all, you can immediately picture the packaging that you're dealing with, right? This is sort of clamshell-type plastic container, or a plastic bag. They sometimes have, like, the sort of heavy-duty plastic bag.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got really hot juice. You know, it's kind of soaking in its own delicious juice, right?
Yeah.
But it's coated in this slimy, juicy seasoning. And so you would think, like, this is just chicken. You could actually just kind of dig in and eat it. But you immediately start spilling hot juice everywhere. You're flailing just to get the package open, and then good luck getting it closed. So you're essentially spreading rotisserie chicken all over yourself, all over your vehicle. There's no way you're getting the packaging closed again. So your rotisserie chicken is then flopping out of the packaging and then onto your seat or onto the floor. I think it's a disaster. So it's almost a less intuitive answer, but I think I'm coming down on rotisserie chicken.
So, this segment typically devolves into stupid shit Ike's done while driving.
I know you've eaten rotisserie chicken now.
So,
in the car.
So, actually, I have never eaten rotisserie chicken in the car. My cousin, who was my roommate for a while and drove a WRX with a manual transmission, I was in the vehicle. We went to Meijer down in Bloomington, Illinois, is where we lived. Not too far from, I know you spent some time in Champaign.
I did indeed.
So, you know those like little like backcountry roads that's down there. And, you know, there's straightaways for a while, but then there's just a random turn for no good goddamn reason. So I was in the car with him, watching him down a whole rotisserie chicken from Meijer, like just driving around. Like, I am in awe. And no mess, no fuss, no muss. I'm going to give that, though, in the top 3 pantheon, though, because I do think the rotisserie chicken, given, you know, how it's prepared, could really be a, you know, damaging, you know, not only to yourself, but to your interior, and that stain and that smell, because rotisserie chicken smell does not come out of shit. So I'm going to put this into top 3. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
And let me just say, there's something else that's kind of insidious about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I understand people might love cereal, they might love soup, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The rotisserie chicken, the aroma of rotisserie chicken is one of the most irresistible smells. And I know for a fact I'm not alone in this. When you go to the checkout counter, you ever go to a grocery store and buy rotisserie chicken and you don't do the self-checkout? If you notice, if a human being is checking you out, like maybe 7 out of 10 times, they will comment like, "Oh, that smells so good. That really makes me hungry." And that's the truth, is the smell of those things. You're just immediately like, I know that's the other thing, is you're never buying them when you're not starved. Like, you're buying them because you're starving and you don't have time to cook and you need something really good.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a rotisserie chicken. And so you're already starving, and then the smell of it calls to you. You need to put it in the trunk, or else it will call to you and it will dare you. It will say to you, "Ike, just tear off the drumstick. It's no problem. I come right apart. I've been cooked so long. My flesh is tender." And then you will do it, and then you will be in a world of rotisserie pain.
Mm-hmm. This is true. And there's the aftermath you have to deal with, too, which is one of the more difficult aftermaths to deal with in a vehicle. Because it's not a small mess. You know, again, stupid shit I've done in cars. You can eat a crab while you're driving, because it comes down to a much smaller mess area. You can put it into a cup. A rotisserie chicken is a much larger carcass left over. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, so I have to ask now, So first of all, I am very honored that I'm in the top three. Where who else is in the? Do you know off the top of your head who else, or not who, but what are the other meals?
Well, I have it. I have it a list because I lost track for a while. So I've compiled my list of the top three. So, you replaced from Everyday Driver. They're now in the number 4 position. He was very adamant about Kit Kats in cars and the when you break it apart, because only an animal eats it without breaking them apart. That little bit of chocolate will get places and will stain shit. And then right above you is Matt Hardigree with a matzo ball soup. And then number 1 is Fondue from Everyone Racers.
Fondue. That's a good one. You know what? By the way, one of my early ones was gonna be French dip, because the same fondue concept, which is, it's a requirement. It's a requisite that you actually dip it in something messy, and the jus for French dip is even more sloshy than your fondue. But I think it's great. And a matzo ball soup. I also had soup, so I'm honored, I think, and I don't know whatever massive supercomputers you're using to grade these responses, but I applaud the software.
It's just a lot of experience and know-how. Like, have I done that in a car? This is because it's a mess to how dead am I going to be trying to eat this? So there's a ratio in there. So then. The next question, and again, almost as difficult, hardest makeup to apply while driving.
Yeah, see, to me this isn't difficult, and it's probably because I know so little about applying makeup. But I don't wear makeup. But I've seen people who do. I've seen them apply what I believe is called eyeliner, wherein they take what looks to be a pencil and they draw within microns of their eyeball. Now, when I see people do this standing stationary in a room that is not moving, in the best lighting and, everything, the best possible sort of situation, I'm impressed that they don't pull an Oedipus and sort of, put it through their cornea. So, I mean, I don't know how you do that driving. You've got a sharp object and an eyeball. I mean, it's going to turn into a horror movie as far as I'm concerned. So,
see, that is the typical answer, and it is a good answer. I do think that is one of the most dangerous. See, you went straight to the danger factor. The true thing here, and someone else pointed this out, I forget who, but they pointed out when you close your eye to put on mascara, that's more dangerous because you're actually taking your eyes off the road. So, again, the pencil eyeliner, your eyes are open. They're not on the road, but they're still open. So,
okay. So I don't know the mechanics of putting on mascara, but the amount of concentration that must be required to draw precisely with the eyeliner, are you telling me that is less than the sort of what would be hardly more than an extended blink to just get the mascara on the eyelid and then sort of it's on and it's off, right? I mean,
you bring up an interesting point, but still, best case scenario, you're pulling for number 2 here, because the number 1 answer has been and will basically, I think, forever be insane clown posse clown makeup. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that deserves it. That absolutely deserves it. Although I guess Tom, what's his name? The Tom. Can't remember his name right now. The famed makeup artist, the guy who did Land of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Night of the, Italian. Anyways, he's one of the legendary guys. Theoretically, he using latex and everything like that. If you're including makeup like that, he is a makeup artist. Then you could say that would be even more difficult to do a movie makeup job, turn yourself into a Walking Dead zombie or whatever,
That is a good point. I like where you're going with that. And it reminds me of there was tale, I guess, one of the main actors on the Planet of the Apes, the old Charlton Heston one, used to wear his makeup home while he was driving. So he had the mask and everything on. Yeah, so he loved driving down the highway, because no one knows this movie's coming out, and all they see is an ape face just driving a car. Like, what is going on? So,
but Charlton Heston wasn't an ape in that.
No, it wasn't Charlton Heston. It was one of the other actors. I just because there's so many other Planet of the Apes movies. The original one, the OG, Charlton Heston version.
Yeah.
So,
The Damn You All to Hell.
Yeah, well, I think they probably say that in all of them now, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Good point.
Get your hands off me, you damn dirty human. Oh, it's like the old movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of come to the core of who you are as a car person. I think we learned a lot about you, which I think we've all grown a little here, too. So
we have, yes.
So I have to bring it to Tempest because I love the podcast. There's 3 episodes as we're recording this, and I don't know when the next episode is going to come out. It might be after this or before this. And there's this is the time where I'm just going to sit here and compliment you for the next 5 minutes. So I love the style, and I have to know there's a very NPR kind of style to it. Which, if you're not familiar, I forget the exact, I think it's like This American Life is the particular one I'm thinking of, where it's like you talk over and then you cut to segments where you're talking with the interviewee, and then you come back and you're talking about it. And there's this very well-defined narrative that takes you, from beginning to end. And you really do get to know and feel for these people in these relatively short half-hour long episodes, which is a phenomenal thing to pull off, which... Bravo for your ability to do that. And then these people you pull from, the first 3 episodes have all been, compelling. Now, obviously, one is about yourself, so that's kind of cheating. But, I got an interesting story. That'll make this interesting. But there's almost a moral of a story to the episodes as well, which I think is very, nice to have in that. And it's a perfect short commute, or really what this would be good for me is my line of thinking is this is a perfect cool down on your way home from the gym kind of podcast to listen to, because it's in that style, it's in that vein, and it's not going to you might cry a little bit, which maybe you don't want to do, and that's why you leave the gym before you listen to it. But the production is phenomenal. I listen to a lot of podcasts, doing what I do, trying to figure out who I'm going to get, who's going to come on the show, who's going to be interesting and compelling. And, a lot of them do, you might be a great conversationalist, but the equipment kind of sucks. And you said there's a background in broadcast, and it really kind of shines through. So, that's my take, is just listening to the first 3 episodes. It's absolutely delightful. It's one of these where I have a road trip coming up. I'm going to be going back home to Chicago from Maryland, and I'm going to be saving up the episodes, and I'm going to listen to the first 3 with my wife in the car as well, because I think this is, something where, like you said, it's a human story about cars. It's not a car story that involves humans, and I think it's very, even if you don't care about cars at all, I think this is very much up the alley of anyone who really likes listening to podcasts. So if you're trying to draw a significant other into your hobby or your lifestyle, I think this is a very good place to kind of be well, we're into car, why don't we turn on this? And before they know it, they're crying over someone who was in a car accident or is looking for an old Mopar. So
thank you. I mean, I can't tell you how much that means to me. It's, I just couldn't be more sincere when I say that. These episodes take what people hear when they're at the final versions takes about 80 to 100 hours per episode to create. So, a lot goes into it. I don't want it to sound tortured. Read it over and all that. I want it to sound sort of, natural and and everything. But but obviously there's a lot there. There's a lot of interviews, and I think there was probably something along the lines of 12 to 14 hours of interviews just for the 30-minute episode of episode 2 that you were referencing about the missing Mopar 74 Roadrunner.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of editing that goes into it. There's a lot of sort of curating, and then I do the music for it too, which is another thing that obviously I'm proud of, and but that's another thing that takes a long time, and it's not just sort of thoughtlessly kind of throwing like, oh, this sounds cool. I haven't really shared this too publicly, but my approach with the music for it is that actually every episode has its own kind of anchor song that happens at the very end of the episode. It kind of, you hear the song in full, and throughout the episode you'll hear these kind of subtle music cues, and those are isolated elements of that song that you never hear together until the very end. When the story has come together to its conclusion, then the song is able to come together. So, even in that, that takes a long time to sort of figure that out. So, to hear people recognize or acknowledge or appreciate, production or the stories, it means a lot. And, when you're doing this stuff, and I'm still in production, but I'm almost done with everything, but before it even airs, it's like you're doing all this work, and you kind of go, geez, I hope people like this. So, the response has been positive, and that's been, it's been gratifying. So thank you for saying all that.
Then I absolutely mean it, and you deserve all of it. So, you obviously have you either are very talented, or you have a very deep background in, broadcasting or talking, publicly. How did you get from here where we're at now? Where did you begin, and how did you get into, being so adept at doing this? Where does that come from?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I started in radio. I was sort of just kind of a lucky thing. I was always really into music and was always, playing music. Even I taught myself how to play guitar at 11. So playing music was a big thing. And then I got really into obscure records in middle school. And what that really, that was a nice coincidence with the fact that the high school that I went to, there was a small public radio station and it broadcasted out of the basement. So they had some kind of deal, I guess, where it was basically the high school maintained it. They did have one actual dedicated engineer, but it was kind of student run, but it was a legitimate public radio station. There was also a local cable channel that came out of there. So I was like, wow, radio, and playing records. And so I got this is back in 1994. So, I got my FCC licenses, which is what you had to do back then, and I don't know if you have to do it now. But and then so that was kind of my start to broadcasting. And then when I got to college, I instead of kind of getting your kind of college job, I wanted to get experience as a professional writer as quickly as possible. So I started writing radio ads for a small national agency. I just kind of went around to every business that I could and was like, just let me write your ads. I'll write them for free. And I think I wrote a couple local car dealer commercials when I was a freshman in college. And then we had kind of rolled that into some actual legitimate, working for a small agency. So I was writing radio ads for this agency, but then also I started doing it for the local radio station. And I would turn my radio scripts in, and there was a point where I was writing something 15 to 30 scripts a week. And I would turn them over to production, and I would just be like, they're blowing it. They don't get my vision. And so I was like, well, I guess I got to learn how to be a producer, because the only way these commercials are going to get made in the way that I want them is if I do them myself. And so I would get my roommates to come down to the radio station and, buy them beer, and we'd, just kind of drink some beer, and here's my scripts, and kind of direct them. Not with any training, just sort of like, okay, I figured out how to use the programs, and I'm going to direct you guys. And that became, so that's how I started making radio commercials. And I guess I took that, and then you pointed out NPR, and I really, after college, really enjoyed listening to shows like This American Life, and then, so I guess the last thing I'll say that I kind of cut my teeth on was I do writing for other things, not just about cars, and I got this really, so, I have a landline just because I'm a journalist, so it's easier than using my cell phone a lot of times. So I get those crazy, weird scam calls. Like I get, 10 to 15 of them a day, maybe. Yeah. And my wife she gets so annoyed with it. But I can't not, mess with them or do whatever. I just, I can't just hang the phone up. I've always got to, mess with them back, So anyways, I have this bad habit of doing that. So one day I get a call, and it was just this, local-looking number, but no name attached to it. I picked it up, and it hung up. It wasn't even like I heard anything. And for some reason, I really couldn't tell you why, other than I guess I was just in the mood to fuck with somebody. I called back, and I don't know what I was expecting, but I called back, and instead of getting like a recording or even getting some weird phone spammer, I got a recording that was like a robot voice, and it said, "Hello, Flipper. Press 1 to let your fish go." Or something really weird like that. And I was like, what the fuck? And so I called it back, and I got it again, and I tried to follow the prompts, but I couldn't get anywhere. Like it was like, press 1 to let your fish go, or press 2 to feed your fish, something really weird. And I just kind of became a little bit like obsessed with it because it was just so strange. And I pitched it to a really great publication which just ceased publishing. They're called The All. And it was edited by Sylvia Killingsworth from The New Yorker, formerly The New Yorker. And I had never written for her before, but I was just like, I'd always really loved The All, and I just said, hey, I got to write about this. I'm going to do like this crazy deep dive investigative reporting on this. And she saw the vision, and she was like, not only do I want you to write this, I want you to do a podcast for it. I want you to do an audio version of it because it involves all this weird audio on the phone. And I did. And that happened right before, or actually maybe right as I was writing my first stuff for Jalopnik. So that was actually, it's a lot more rough around the edges, but I also really like that. You can, if you Google dial D for dolphin, The All or something, you'll probably be able to find it pretty easy. So, anyways, that's my sorry about such a long answer. But yeah,
that's the great thing about this medium, though, is you prattle on. It doesn't matter. It's fascinating. You reminded me because I used to have the Awe in my podcasting queue, and I haven't had it in there for a while, and I'm wondering what the heck happened. So I'm going to have to go do some research because I did enjoy those for the longest time. It's fascinating. You obviously led a very interesting life when it comes to kind of your career and like how it all, started and ended, or not ended, but started and came to this. So how did you get into cars then? Has that been something you were born into? Is that something where you kind of, grew into it as you got older? Like, tell us a little bit of background about that.
It's interesting. It kind of skipped a generation. My grandfather, who you're going to be hearing about in a couple future episodes, unfortunately he passed away, but his name is Buddy. He was a professional truck driver, and he was a mechanic, and he was an amateur race car driver. I didn't really know that. I mean, when I was a kid and he was around, I knew he was a truck driver. But he was just a great guy. So, it's not like we talked about work. So, my parents weren't, car people. My dad, as you're going to hear about my dad, he's got some funny car stories. There's an episode coming up with him, which is, if I may say so, hilarious. In fact, I had mentioned that I put together sort of a mock segment when I pitched this to Jalopnik, and I did it with my dad's story because I thought, okay, if there's one really great car story, and it's a little, it's too funny for an essay, and it really works well. You got to hear my dad tell it. Like, you got to hear it in his voice. That was the one. So they heard that, and they were like, do that and make it twice as long. So that episode is coming up. Not this week, but the next. So not this coming Tuesday, but the one after that. So basically a week after this episode airs. Anyways, Buddy, Buddy was big time, my grandpa, big time car guy, but it kind of skipped a generation. My parents really weren't all that into it. I've always liked cars. I probably have gotten more and more interested in them, but I think the thing, I've always really loved cars. I'm not really sure how else to say it. I wish I could tell you I've owned a bunch of really amazing cars and I've done amazing work. Those are things I aspire to. But the thing about cars that I really like is that people think that, like, a car person is a certain, like, type of person. And, it's like that's just a kind of a specialized thing. And I get why people think that. My feeling is that cars are actually one of the most unifying things of anything. Like, eating, drinking, breathing, like, we all have to do these things. And there are the occasional people who are like, I do not ride in cars, I do not drive a car, I am staunchly against cars. But even they have a connection to cars in their total hatred of cars. So I would argue even they are not immune from it. Mm-hmm. But everyone has cars in common. And so when we talk about these stories, they should appeal to people who aren't just car people because, I talk to anyone and they're not a car person. They drive some car they don't really care about. They're leasing it. They don't even know what it is. They couldn't tell you how many cylinders it has. And yet they'll be able to tell you a great story about a car when they learn to drive stick or something crazy that happened. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I modified this car, or I got 50 more horsepower of the engine. Or that's not, everyone's got a story about a car, and it doesn't have to be this, like, I was wrenching on a car because I'm a car person. So, yeah.
I agree 100% with you. That's kind of the reason I started doing this show in the format I do it, is because every single person, like, every time I'm forced to go to a party, I am a very socially awkward person. So, like, when I'm forced to go to a party with the missus or, just family stuff, whatever, like, or work stuff, you get drawn into stuff. Whenever I'm being introduced to a group of people, I'm terrible with remembering people's names, but what I will do is I will ask them, like, it'd be like, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Mike. What's your name? Okay, I'm not going to remember that. Hey, what was your first car? Like, what did you first start driving in? Oh, I got, my parents got me, an old, Plymouth Satellite or, something, and, it was a piece of crap, or I had, like, an old, like, Chevette, and, like, they'll prattle on about, like, how terrible their cars were. And that makes it so much easier for me to go, like, hey, guy who started with this Chevette, right? Like, yeah, that's me. Like, okay. That makes it so much easier. But everyone has a car story. Everyone has that, maybe their first car wasn't their worst car, or maybe it was an amazing car and they lost track of it, or, whatever it is. Everyone has, a car story, as long as you're over the age of 16. And, most people I interact with are. And the people under 16, I just try not to interact with. So, like, how are the Pokemons? Is that still a thing? Do you do the Go? I don't know how this works anymore. Can you explain computers to me? Do you know how Skype works? Because I've been having some issues.
Right.
I've become that person. So, it's a good example of, and out in Colorado, you have some good podcasters near you by the name of Team Clearcoat.
Oh, yeah.
But they have when they were on the show, we were kind of talking about this, and it was, what makes shows like Top Gear compelling is not the cars they drive, it's the camaraderie between them. And, at the end of the day, every story on television, in any media whatsoever, is always a story of interaction between people. And I think you do a very good job of, cutting to the quick about that, but also still putting on top the car elements that kind of the car nuts will go, gaga for. So how do you decide who you're going to, do these, long-form interviews with?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And in some ways, the story, kind of dictates that. As you heard, the first episode is very different than the second in that you pointed out the first episode is personal, but it's also a very straight narrative story about sort of there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And I already knew what happened. So my role as a storyteller there is to say, who do I speak with to tell this story the best? Now, in this case, it was between my brother and I. I wanted him to do the bulk of the storytelling and kind of get in there and kind of, because we both experienced it, kind of have it back and forth, and then bring in another element there. But in the case of episode 2, again, the Roadrunner episode, I went out to Vancouver, Washington with a very, minimal idea of where the story was even going, and thinking to myself, this guy Jason Godsoul is going to be just kind of the guy I talk to. I remember I had told him, hey, if you get a chance, I'd really like to interview your wife, because when I do stuff for my essays, and I fly out to meet with people and spend 2-3 days with them, I generally tell them, I would really like to speak with any friends that you have, if you're married, I'd love to speak with your spouse, and just kind of speak with whoever. And I do that, and I think those are fruitful. And when I landed in Vancouver, he was like, or in Portland, and then drove to Vancouver, he was like, hey, meet me at my mom's house. Here's her address. And that's how I didn't know I was going to be speaking to his mom. And I really think that she was just critical. I can't imagine that story now without Lonnie, his mother. So to some degree, you have to kind of take the opportunity and just talk to as many people as possible, and then figure out how to do it, how to kind of balance everything. Because if it was just Jason in that story, it had been a lot of stuff about V16s and specs on GM cars, which were great, and we had amazing conversations. And he's a really interesting guy, and what he's doing is really fascinating. But, he's very much that car person that we typically think about. And you gotta balance that. His mother, as we find out, she's almost in some ways just as much a car person as him, but she's the opposite. She knows nothing about cars. She's just kind of passionate on this more primal level,
Mm-hmm. It's very good, and that kind of brings me to another question. How often do you cry, and how much more am I going to cry this season? So... it's funny. I mean, I'm a somewhat emotional person, as you might imagine, the fact that I make these things. When I interviewed Jenny Helms, not for the podcast, but for an essay I did for Jalopnik, she is a Ferrari mechanic, and she has overcome some pretty hard things in her life. And has had to kind of experience some stuff that no one should have to. But she is incredibly inspiring because she is like one of the most talented people. She's the shop foreman of an internationally renowned Ferrari place. She's really overcome these things. When she told me the tragic part of her story without giving anything away,
it was like when she started telling it, I didn't have to ask a single question. I mean, I remember transcribing it. It was something like 40 minutes of her just talking and telling this thing that I don't know that she'd ever said the stuff out loud. And she just said it all in one fell swoop. And I was crying when she was telling me. Steven Weber, the episode 3 is about Steven Weber. He's the kind of guy I didn't expect to be so moved, but as you hear, he is such a genuine, earnest, sincere guy, and his views on people and cars are moving. I mean, and it's not, I mean, he's gone through some horrible stuff too, but what made me cry with him is when he kind of just says, you know, it's not, I don't love any particular car. I love every car as long as someone else loves it. Like, I just love cars and people. And I guess when you take that with everything that's gone through in his life, you're just like, my God, like, this guy is one of the most incredible people in the world to just have this unabashed, pure love for cars and people. And to me, that's moving. So there's how many more times will you cry for the podcast? 7 episodes. Hopefully you cried in episode 2 and episode 3. You should have certainly cried. Maybe there's one more, but there's one of those episodes that's going to make you laugh harder than you cried. I promise you that.
All right, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for all the emotions, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm, yeah, the first episode is phenomenal. I love the narrative storytelling of it. But again, I listened to 1, 3, and then 2, and 3 going to 2 is, I think, a little bit less of an emotional jump than, you know, going 1, 2, into 3. I don't know why, but it is, you know, these are, you know, real life stories of these people, and they are phenomenal, you know, to listen to, and you do such an amazing job with it. You know, I really can't say enough nice things about the program. And again, it is, I will say, out of every podcast I listen to out there, I'm throwing NPR, everything into it. I don't know if you limit your time, but it is one of those things where at the end of it, I am like, that was so well done, produced, edited, and so succinct, and just like, it feels like there's nothing missing and nothing more that really can be added. It's just such a wonderful little pill, but at the end of it, I'm always like, I just need to know a little bit more, even though I feel like it's complete. And I think it's one of the best produced, like, really anything out there. And the fact that this is, you know, pretty much I'm not going to say it's a one-man show, but you're doing the lion's share of the work, is so remarkable to me. And I cannot say enough. And really, if you're listening to the sound of my voice, you need to go like, all right, I'm going to turn off this idiot, and I'm going to go and I'm going to turn on this podcast that he's ranting and raving about. So,
again, thank you. Thank you. It means a lot. And I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to know that it's landing for you, and the responses I've got have been really good. It's an honor. I just, you know, I'm trying to tell good stories, and I think that you know, not to go off on a whole thing, and I'm not going to, but I think that in the media that we have today, I think that there's this idea like that everything should be kind of shorter, and everyone's got a short attention span. That's the sort of, you've got to grab them with a crazy headline, and then it should be 200 words long, and, you know, because people are just clicking all over the place now. And, you know, I walked in Jalopnik and said, here's a 6,000-word article. And they said, you know, great, let's do it. And then I'm doing this podcast, and it's this kind of, you know, slow pace. I think of it almost as like a cinematic in a way. That's what I'm going for. And people, I think they realize how much they miss that stuff. Is like, yeah, you know, people haven't become these dumb people with like just 30-second attention spans. People just, even though technology has changed and all that, I think just it's a timeless thing. People like stories, and that's what this is about.
Mm-hmm. I really can't think of a better way to kind of summarize it all up. it's such a, you get this wonderful twofold of the people in the cars and kind of the stories to kind of bind us all together. And they're coming up on the end of time, and I'm going to have to get you back because I know there's so much more here we can kind of delve into. I don't even think we touched most of the topics I sent over to you today. That's what happens. Interesting people come on. So, where can people find the show? Where can they find your work? Let us know where we can go to kind of, experience what you have to offer out there.
Great. Well, so, go to Apple Podcast or Spotify or Panoply, NPR One, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, any of these things, Google Play. Type in Tempest. It should be, hard to miss. It's the artwork features 63 Tempest on it and me, and it says the word Tempest really big. That's the one you want. You can read my essays. And also every episode goes live Tuesday. So if you go to Jalopnik, Tuesday sometime around mid-morning, there'll be a small article that goes up in Jalopnik that kind of teases the episode, and you can actually stream it straight from that page. As far as my writing goes, there's not a lot of people out there named David Obuchowski who are writers. There's an architect in New York City. He seems like he's doing great work. We're of no relation. And if you Google David Obuchowski, Jalopnik, or whatever, you'll be able to. Actually, I have a website. It's probably not completely up to date, but davidobuchowski.com. It shouldn't be too tough to find with my name. And if you want to read the story that got the whole thing started with Jalopnik, go ahead and Google BMW Addiction Jalopnik. And you will be brought to my first story that I wrote for them about a man who was my former next-door neighbor, who was the most unassuming guy in the world. He had a couple of vintage BMWs, and then one day he told me and my wife that he embezzled almost $500,000 because he was addicted to BMW 2002s. He had 50 of them hidden all over the state, and he got caught, and his wife was leaving him. His children stopped talking to him. He was losing his house, and he was about to go to prison. Mm-hmm. And that's all in the first paragraph.
Mm-hmm. I remember reading that story that's from a while ago, and I totally forgot that was you who wrote that. That was a wonderful article. I remember
it's crazy.
I shared that all over because I have a friend who's obviously, there's always one who's a BMW addict. Like, you need to read this.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
We need to talk about how you keep coming across all these stories, but we're going to have to save that, like how all this stuff seems to happen around you. We're going to have to save that for another time. So, David, it was such a delight to have you on. I really do appreciate you spending some time with me this evening. I'm going to say goodbye to you off there. Yeah, and everyone who's listening, we'll be back. Absolute pleasure, David. And everyone listening.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. We'll be right back.
Hey there, Danny with Right Foot Down. I messed up this ad read so many times because I really want to tell you about Track Monkey Apparel. They make great quality enthusiast shirts along with hats, stickers, watches, patches, you name it. A couple of my personal favorites are their Life is Better at the Track tee and their One Track Mind tee. You should really check them out and see for yourself. Their products are great for you or the gearhead in your life. Visit trackmonkeyapparel.com.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. If you like what you hear, make sure you tell a friend, a loved one, coworker, whoever you think may enjoy this show. You can find us on all social media at Untitled Car Show, and you just search for us wherever you're online at, and you should be able to find us. All right, thanks everyone so much for listening. Have a good night, have a good evening, wherever you are, whatever time it is there. Thanks so much for listening. Please be safe out there.